I am Rachel, 33 years old, and my entire marriage was a calculated illusion. My in-laws packed their designer luggage into the waiting luxury SUV, claiming they were off to Chicago for an urgent family legal matter. They dumped the bedpans, the sterile syringes, and a stack of medical charts into my arms, leaving me behind in their massive Bellevue mansion to care for their paralyzed 79-year-old grandmother. But the very second their car disappeared down the long driveway, the dying woman I was supposed to be nursing ripped out her oxygen tube, stood up from her wheelchair, and walked straight over to the liquor cabinet. She poured a glass of bourbon, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Lock the doors, Rachel. They are keeping a dark secret." Before I tell you how a supposedly paralyzed grandmother and a forensic accountant teamed up to destroy a family of grifters, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had your kindness mistaken for weakness. Just 10 minutes before that mind-bending moment, the tension in the foyer had been suffocating. I was standing by the heavy oak front door wearing old sweatpants and holding a tray of medical supplies. My husband of 5 years, Jason, leaned in and pressed a careless, obligatory kiss to my cheek. "Make sure you do not miss Grandmother Beatrice's medication schedule," he instructed, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive tailored suit. "I know taking care of a bedridden woman is not glamorous, but this is what family does. It is a wife's duty to step up when we have serious business to handle." Beside him stood his brother-in-law, Malik. Malik, a tall and imposing Black American man who was married to Jason's sister Vanessa, was a high-rolling real estate broker who never missed a single opportunity to belittle my career. He smirked as he tossed his custom golf clubs into the trunk of the SUV. "Come on, Jason," Malik sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Do not stress her out too much. Rachel's brain is only wired for typing numbers into spreadsheets for other people. She is a freelance forensic accountant, not a real estate mastermind like us. Just let her focus on changing the sheets while the adults handle the real assets in Chicago." What Malik arrogantly failed to realize was that, as a forensic accountant, my daily life revolved around exposing exactly the kind of financial crimes he thought he was so cleverly executing. I tracked hidden offshore accounts and unraveled complex money laundering schemes for major corporations. Yet here I was, being treated like an uneducated servant. Brenda, my mother-in-law, rolled down the passenger window to deliver her parting shot. She complained loudly about how much of an inconvenience this trip was for her social calendar, before explicitly reminding me not to touch the expensive imported wine in the cellar. I just nodded automatically and swallowed my pride, gripping the plastic medical tray so tightly my knuckles turned stark white. I watched the vehicle pull away, feeling like an unpaid maid rather than a respected member of the family. As the silence of the massive house settled around me, a familiar, suffocating weight pressed down on my chest. For 5 years, I had been the designated scapegoat for this family. When Jason and I first got married, I drained my entire life savings, exactly $80,000, to bail out his failing tech startup. I worked grueling 14-hour days tracking missing assets and auditing corporate fraud cases just to keep our heads above water and pay off the massive debts he recklessly accumulated. I spent my nights desperately trying to keep my career afloat, analyzing spreadsheets until my eyes burned, only to wake up at dawn to the sound of Brenda demanding I prepare her morning espresso. Instead of gratitude, Jason rewarded my profound sacrifice by moving us into his parents' sprawling $5 million lakefront estate under the guise of saving money. But I quickly realized it was never about saving money for our future. It was about securing a free live-in nurse for Beatrice after she suffered a massive stroke. I was expected to manage my highly demanding career while fetching water, preparing pureed meals, lifting a grown woman out of bed, and tolerating the daily venomous insults from Brenda and Richard. They treated me like a lower-class gold digger who was incredibly lucky to be breathing their wealthy air. I sacrificed my youth, my finances, and my sanity to keep this family afloat, constantly convincing myself that this was simply what unconditional love required. I closed the front door, engaging the heavy brass deadbolt, and turned around to face the living room, mentally preparing myself for another long, exhausting weekend of sponge baths and silence. But the living room was empty. Beatrice's motorized wheelchair sat abandoned next to the stone fireplace, the thick woolen blanket tossed carelessly onto the floor. Panic spiked instantly in my throat. Beatrice was supposed to be completely paralyzed on her entire left side. She could not walk. She could barely speak. I rushed toward the kitchen, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, terrified that she had somehow fallen and injured herself. There, standing perfectly upright with flawless, rigid posture, was the supposedly bedridden matriarch of the family. Beatrice was not leaning on a walker. She was not slurring her words. She was holding a heavy crystal tumbler, pouring herself a generous measure of top-shelf Kentucky bourbon. I froze in the doorway, the plastic tray slipping from my hands and crashing loudly onto the hardwood floor, sending syringes and pill bottles scattering everywhere. "You are not paralyzed," I stammered, my brain completely short-circuiting as it struggled to process the impossible sight in front of me. Beatrice took a slow, appreciative sip of her drink and set the glass down on the marble island with a sharp clink. Her eyes, usually dull and unfocused, were razor-sharp and terrifyingly clear. "I had to fake it, Rachel," she said, her voice steady, powerful, and commanding. If I did not pretend to be a vegetable, Brenda and Richard would have found a way to heavily sedate me or lock me in a state-run psychiatric facility months ago. She walked toward me, her heels clicking purposefully against the floorboards, displaying a physical vitality that completely contradicted the fragile persona she had maintained for over a year. She grabbed my arm with a grip so strong it made me gasp. "Listen to me very carefully," she whispered urgently. "They are not in Chicago meeting with estate lawyers. They are on their way to Bali for a luxury vacation. Malik is staying behind in the city for 2 days to finalize the forged paperwork to steal this $5 million house. They are transferring the deed into a shell company under Jason's name, and by next Monday, they are going to throw me into a dilapidated nursing home and kick you out onto the street with absolutely nothing." My mind reeled uncontrollably. Steal the house, kick me out. I tried to speak, but the air felt impossibly thin. "Why would Jason need to steal the house right now?" I asked, my voice trembling with confusion and rising panic. "He is my husband. Whatever financial problems we have, we could figure them out together like we always do." Beatrice looked at me with a mixture of profound pity and fierce determination. "Oh, you poor loyal girl," she sighed, shaking her head slowly. "Jason is not trying to solve your financial problems. He is trying to fund his new life." She walked over to the kitchen island and pulled a thick manila envelope from a hidden compartment under the counter, tossing it directly in front of me. "Open it," she commanded. My hands shook as I unclasped the envelope and dumped the contents onto the counter. Out slid a stack of glossy ultrasound photos, receipts from luxury jewelers, and highly confidential banking transfer requests. "Jason is using the equity he is illegally pulling from my estate to buy a $2 million penthouse downtown," Beatrice explained coldly as I stared at the ultrasound images in utter horror. "But he is not buying it for you. He is buying it for Amber." Amber. The name echoed in my head like a gunshot. Amber was the 26-year-old receptionist at Jason's new consulting firm. I had met her twice at company holiday parties. She had always been overly friendly, always touching Jason's arm, always laughing a little too loudly at his terrible jokes. I had dismissed my discomfort as petty jealousy, choosing to trust the man I had given my life savings to. I stared at the name printed on the top corner of the ultrasound. Amber. The dates proved everything. While I was struggling to pay our household bills and washing his grandmother's linens, he was picking out baby names with his pregnant mistress. "Jason has been sleeping with her for 8 months, Beatrice continued, delivering the final crushing blow without flinching. "And Amber is currently 4 months pregnant with his child. They needed cash fast to close on the penthouse before the baby arrives." Malik orchestrated the whole thing because he gets a massive cut of the fraudulent real estate transaction. Brenda, Richard, and Vanessa all know about the baby. They have been having secret family dinners with Amber for weeks while you were trapped here taking care of me. The betrayal was absolute. Every single member of this family had looked me in the eye, eaten the food I cooked, accepted the financial sacrifices I made, and smiled while orchestrating my complete destruction. I did not drop to the floor. I did not scream or shatter the crystal glass sitting on the counter. Tears did not even form in my eyes. Instead, a strange absolute coldness washed over my entire body. My grief was immediately overridden by my professional instincts. I am a forensic accountant. I hunt financial predators for a living. And the predator was sleeping in my own bed. I left the ultrasound photos on the granite island and sprinted up the sweeping staircase to Jason's home office. He always bragged about his custom-built, heavily encrypted desktop, claiming it was a fortress no one could penetrate. But arrogant men always make the same predictable mistakes. He used the same base password variation for his banking that he used for his email. Within 90 seconds, I bypassed his firewall and accessed his synced applications. I opened his messages, and the digital paper trail unspooled before my eyes, like a map leading straight to his destruction. The first thing I saw was a hidden iMessage group chat appropriately named Bali Payday. There were 5 members: Jason, Brenda, Richard, Vanessa, and Malik. I scrolled through weeks of messages, reading the sheer contempt they held for me. Brenda had sent a text 3 days ago, saying, "I cannot wait to leave that clueless maid behind. Just make sure Rachel sanitizes the bathroom before she gets kicked out." Richard replied with a laughing emoji, adding, "She is too busy typing numbers to notice we are pulling the rug out from under her." But Malik was the one driving the criminal enterprise. His messages were long, detailed, and overflowing with legal arrogance. He outlined the exact loopholes he planned to exploit to forge Beatrice's signature on a power of attorney document. "Do not worry about the notary," Malik had typed. "I have a guy in my brokerage firm who will stamp the document without asking questions. Once I file the deed transfer tomorrow afternoon, the house goes into the new shell company. By the time Rachel figures out she is homeless, we will be drinking margaritas on the beach and Amber will have her penthouse keys." They were not just stealing, they were treating my imminent homelessness as a punchline. Jason chimed in, sending a photo of a diamond tennis bracelet with the caption, "Amber is going to love this push, present paid for by Grandma's estate." Reading the words "push present" made my vision tunnel. 2 years ago, I lay in a sterile hospital bed, gripping the thin paper blankets, while the doctor told me there was no longer a heartbeat. I had lost our baby at 14 weeks. When we returned to this very house, Brenda did not offer me a hug or a warm meal. She stood in the kitchen sipping her tea and coldly stated that if I did not spend so many hours staring at computer screens, my body might actually be capable of carrying a child to term. Jason stood right next to her and said absolutely nothing to defend me. I carried that crushing guilt every single day, believing my dedication to paying off his debts had cost me my baby. Now seeing them gleefully celebrate Amber's pregnancy, buying her diamonds with stolen money while mocking my existence was the ultimate betrayal. The loyalty I had bled out for this family evaporated instantly, leaving behind nothing but a burning clinical desire for absolute ruin. I cracked my knuckles and went to work. If Malik thought my job was just typing numbers, he was about to learn how incredibly dangerous those numbers could be. I opened my specialized tracking software and began pulling the threads he so carelessly left behind. He had set up a limited liability company called Lakeside Holdings to receive the deed to the house. But Malik was a real estate broker, not a digital security expert. He made amateur mistakes. He used his personal IP address to register the company online and routed the initial filing fees through a bank account registered in Oregon. Then, I tracked Jason's recent banking activity. He had already initiated a massive wire transfer application pulling a $200,000 equity advance against the house using the fraudulent power of attorney. The funds were queued to clear into Amber's personal account by Monday morning. I documented every IP address, every timestamp, and every routing number. I took high-resolution screenshots of the Bali payday group chat, exporting the entire conversation log to my secure cloud server. Malik's fatal error was crossing state lines with his digital transactions. By routing the fraudulent payments through an out-of-state bank and setting up wire transfers that utilized federal banking systems, he had elevated his little family scam from a local civil dispute into a major federal offense. I compiled a massive digital dossier, a bulletproof portfolio of evidence that mapped out a coordinated conspiracy to commit fraud. I printed the entire stack of documents, the glowing red light on the printer, matching the warning sirens going off in my head. I carried the thick stack of printed evidence back downstairs to the kitchen where Beatrice was pouring herself a second glass of bourbon. I dropped the dossier onto the marble island. They are using a forged power of attorney, I told her. Malik is filing the deed transfer tomorrow afternoon, and Jason has a $200,000 wire transfer queued to clear on Monday for Amber's penthouse. Beatrice did not flinch. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spread across her wrinkled face. She reached into the deep pockets of her silk robe and pulled out a heavy brass key. She walked over to the vintage grandfather clock in the corner of the living room, reached behind the pendulum and unlocked a hidden steel lockbox bolted directly into the wall. She returned to the island and dropped a thick, bound legal ledger on top of my printed evidence. "Malik is a fool," she said, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "He thinks because he has a real estate license, he understands how true wealth is structured. He is trying to steal a house that technically does not exist in my name anymore." I stared at the ledger, bewildered. "What do you mean?" 10 years ago, Beatrice explained, tapping the leather-bound book, I placed this estate and every liquid asset I own into a federal irrevocable trust. I am not the legal owner of this property, the trust is, and a power of attorney cannot dissolve or override an irrevocable trust. My breath caught in my throat as the sheer magnitude of what she was saying clicked into place. "If Malik files that forged deed transfer tomorrow," I said, realizing the trap they were walking right into, "he is not just faking a signature to steal from you. He is attempting to defraud a federally protected entity." "Exactly." Beatrice smiled, her eyes gleaming with ruthless anticipation. "Malik is not just forging a document, Rachel. He is actively committing federal wire fraud and elder financial abuse, and we are going to let him do it." My phone vibrated against the marble countertop, shattering the heavy silence in the kitchen. The caller ID flashed Malik's name. Beatrice gave me a sharp nod, signaling me to answer. I cleared my throat, forcing my vocal cords to relax, and swiped to accept the call. The unmistakable background hum of a luxury airport lounge filtered through the speaker, complete with the clinking of expensive glassware and muted boarding announcements. Rachel Malik purred, his voice oozing with that signature slick professional charm he always wore like a tailored suit. "I hope you are surviving the domestic duties. Listen, I hate to bother you while you are playing nurse, but I am handling some administrative paperwork for Jason before my flight boards. I need you to do me a quick favor and email over a high-resolution scan of Grandma Beatrice's state identification and her social security card. It is just for a routine insurance compliance check regarding her in-home care coverage." The audacity was breathtaking. He was sitting in an airport lounge sipping a cocktail, asking me to hand over the final pieces of identification he needed to finalize the fraudulent deed transfer and steal the roof over my head. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to sound suitably clueless. "I do not know, Malik," I murmured, keeping my tone hesitant and soft. "Jason usually handles all the insurance paperwork. Maybe I should wait for him to call me from Chicago." A heavy, calculated sigh echoed through the phone. It was the exact sound Malik used when he was preparing to manipulate someone into submission. "Rachel, let us be adults here," he said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a subtle but unmistakable edge of menace. "Jason is under an immense amount of pressure right now. He is carrying the financial weight of this entire family, and frankly, your recent lack of cooperation has been a massive source of stress for him. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air like a blade. You know, Jason and I had a long talk over drinks last night. He is starting to wonder if you are truly invested in building a future together. When a man is working this hard to secure his legacy, he needs a partner who supports him without asking unnecessary questions. If you cannot handle a simple administrative task to help your husband out, he might have to seriously reconsider whether this marriage is the right partnership for his long-term goals. Do not make him regret choosing you, Rachel. Just send the documents. My stomach churned at the sheer venom laced within his polite corporate vocabulary. He was explicitly threatening my marriage, dangling Jason's affection like a carrot while holding the stick of divorce over my head. He expected me to cower to desperately prove my worth as a compliant, obedient wife by handing over the keys to my own destruction. I closed my eyes, absorbing the psychological abuse that I had endured for 5 years, but this time it did not break me. It only fueled the icy resolve hardening in my veins. I stared at the phone, visualizing Malik's smug face, and the hypocrisy of it all was staggering. At every family dinner, Malik was the one holding court, at the head of the table, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet while giving long, impassioned speeches about ethics, community building, and systemic justice. As a wealthy Black American real estate mogul, he constantly played the progressive intellectual card, positioning himself as the ultimate moral compass of the family. He loved to lecture me about my freelance accounting career, claiming that counting other people's money lacked societal impact while he was supposedly out there developing neighborhoods and lifting people up. He demanded respect, demanded to be seen as a pillar of integrity. Yet behind that flawless, socially conscious facade hid a cold-blooded financial predator. He was using his brilliant legal mind and industry connections not to build communities, but to architect a devastating felony against a vulnerable, elderly woman. He was actively destroying my life while preaching morality over roasted duck and fine wine. The realization that this man who demanded absolute respect and ethical purity from everyone around him was nothing more than a common thief dressed in designer labels made my blood run absolute ice. I pitched my voice a full octave higher, injecting it with just the right amount of breathless, desperate anxiety. "I am sorry, Malik," I stammered, making sure to sound thoroughly intimidated. "I did not mean to cause any problems for Jason. You know I support him. I will go find her purse right now and scan the cards. Just give me 5 minutes. Please do not tell Jason I was being difficult. I just want to help." "Excellent," Malik replied smoothly, his tone instantly reverting to that of a satisfied, benevolent superior. "I knew you would see reason, Rachel. Send them to my secure email. I will handle the rest." I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. I looked at Beatrice, who was already holding out her pristine, valid state identification card and her original Social Security card. I took them from her, steady hands walked over to the scanner on the kitchen desk, and scanned both documents in perfect high-resolution clarity. I opened my email, attached the files, and typed a brief, polite message stating that I hoped these helped with the insurance compliance. Then I hit send. I stood there and watched the progress bar shoot across the screen until the message swooshed away into the digital ether. By sending him those exact documents, I had just handed him the final necessary components to execute the wire transfer and officially file the forged deed. But I had also done something else. I had legally documented his request for the materials under false pretenses across interstate lines. I had provided the feds with the exact digital timestamp showing when the stolen identification was transmitted, securely anchoring his crime to a federal wire fraud statute. I played the naive, obedient wife, flawlessly laying down the red carpet for him to march straight into a federal penitentiary. As the delivery confirmation popped up on my screen, Beatrice did not waste a single second. She picked up the landline phone mounted on the kitchen wall and dialed a number she knew by heart, The woman who was supposed to be drooling into a cup was standing tall, her eyes burning with the fury of a matriarch who had just been crossed for the last time. Mr. Cohen. Beatrice said, her voice ringing out with absolute lethal authority. It is Beatrice. Yes, the paralysis was a ruse. Cancel all my afternoon appointments. We have a major situation. She paused, listening to the sharp, rapid response from the other end of the line. Mr. Cohen was the most ruthless, feared estate lawyer in the entire state of Washington, a man who destroyed corporate executives for sport. Beatrice had kept him on retainer for over 3 decades, for moments exactly like this. My grandson and his brother-in-law are currently attempting to transfer the deed of the Bellevue property into a fraudulent LLC. She commanded, her tone slicing through the air like a scalpel. They are using a forged power of attorney and stolen identification. I need you to contact your associate at the Federal Bureau of Investigation immediately. Yes, the White-Collar Crime Division. Beatrice met my gaze across the kitchen, her lips curling into a predatory smile that sent a shiver of pure adrenaline down my spine. Tell the federal agents that we have a live wire fraud in progress crossing state lines targeting a protected, irrevocable trust, she instructed the lawyer. Tell them we are going to let the suspects complete the filing. We want them to execute the transaction fully so the felony is locked. Call me back when the trap is primed. Beatrice slammed the phone back onto the receiver, the loud crack echoing through the silent mansion. The bait was taken. The feds were on their way. The trap was officially set. 36 hours later, my phone chimed with a high-priority social media notification. Jason and his parents had officially touched down in Indonesia. They had bypassed the standard hotels and checked directly into the Ayana Resort and Spa in Bali, a breathtaking cliffside sanctuary where the absolute cheapest suite ran $2,000 a night. I sat at the kitchen island with Beatrice, watching an uploaded video of Brenda and Richard being greeted with fresh flower garlands and icy towels. They were acting like visiting royalty as resort staff escorted them to a massive private oceanfront villa. Then Jason posted a photo on his own feed. He was lounging in a private infinity pool overlooking the Indian Ocean, wearing expensive designer sunglasses and holding a vibrant tropical cocktail garnished with a fresh orchid. The caption beneath the photo read, "Business trips are incredibly tough, but someone has to do the hard work." The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it made my stomach churn violently. He was sipping top-shelf liquor halfway across the world, funded entirely by the stolen equity of his supposedly paralyzed grandmother's estate, while firmly believing his naive wife was back home, emptying bedpans and scrubbing toilets. He truly thought he had gotten away with the perfect financial crime. My phone buzzed heavily against the marble this time with an incoming FaceTime call from Jason himself. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a flawless mask of exhausted obedience, pasting on the tired, submissive look he always expected to see, and answered the call. Jason appeared on the bright screen, his face glowing with a fresh, expensive sunburn and a wide, artificial smile. "Hey, babe," he said smoothly, the sound of crashing ocean waves echoing clearly in the background. "Chicago has been absolutely exhausting, but the legal meetings are finally wrapping up. Listen, my accountant just flagged a minor compliance issue regarding our joint tax filings from last quarter. I am sending you a secure link right now. I need you to open it and e-sign the document immediately so we do not get hit with a massive late penalty by the IRS." As he spoke, he shifted his phone to get a better angle, and for a fraction of a second, the large decorative mirror behind him caught a telling reflection. A young woman with long blonde hair, wearing a tiny string bikini and a prominent rounded pregnancy belly, was casually walking across the master bedroom of his luxury villa. It was Amber. She was right there, living my life on my dime. I forced my eyes to stay locked on Jason's lying face and opened the document link he had just sent to my inbox. I scanned the legal jargon rapidly, my forensic accounting background immediately kicking into high gear as I parsed the dense paragraphs. It was not a standard tax document. It was a highly binding postnuptial quitclaim deed. Hidden carefully beneath layers of confusing legal terminology was a predatory clause that would permanently waive my rights to any marital assets, bank accounts, business holdings, or real estate in the event of a divorce. He was trying to trick me into legally signing away my entire life before he served me with separation papers. Staring at that predatory document on my screen, a flood of painful, suffocating memories washed over me. For 5 long years, Jason had systematically weaponized his manufactured stress to force my absolute compliance. Whenever he grossly mismanaged our funds or tanked a promising business venture, he would pace the length of our house, sweating profusely and shouting about how the intense pressure was physically killing him. He would shove high-interest loan documents and shady credit card applications into my hands, insisting that if I truly loved him and believed in his vision, I would sign them immediately without reading the fine print. He masterfully convinced me that questioning his financial decisions was a toxic betrayal of our marriage vows. I had signed away my hard-earned savings, my peace of mind, and my future security because I was terrified of being the unsupportive bad wife who added to his heavy burdens. I had always caved to his emotional manipulation, swallowing my doubts to save his fragile ego and keep the peace in our home. But staring at Amber's pregnant reflection in that mirror, holding a legal document specifically designed to leave me destitute and homeless, the invisible chains he had wrapped around my mind finally snapped. The obedient, terrified wife he thought he was talking to simply no longer existed. "Oh, wow, Jason!" I stammered loudly, raising my voice to sound incredibly frantic and overwhelmed by the technology. "The internet connection here is acting so strange today. The document is not loading properly on my screen at all. I cannot see where I am supposed to sign." He groaned loudly, his artificial loving smile dropping instantly into a scowl of pure, unfiltered irritation. "Just click the blue box at the bottom of the page, Rachel." He snapped, his patience completely evaporating. "It is not that complicated. Just press agree and sign the document so I can get back to work." I tapped the side of my phone microphone repeatedly to create a harsh, popping, static noise. "Jason, you are breaking up," I shouted over the manufactured digital interference. "The windstorm must be messing with the main router again. I will try to look at it later tonight when the signal clears up." Before he could unleash another barrage of verbal abuse or demands, I ended the call and immediately powered down the application. The time for playing his twisted games was officially over. I turned to Beatrice, who was sitting at the dining table reviewing a thick stack of legal briefs Mr. Cohen had just couriered over to the house. "Do it," she commanded, her eyes dark and relentless. I opened my highly secure banking application and selected every single joint credit card, checking account, and savings portfolio tied to Jason, Brenda, and Richard. With swift, precise clicks, I reported every single card as compromised and stolen. I activated total fraud lockdowns on all the primary accounts, a security measure that strictly required in-person verification at a domestic U.S. branch to unfreeze the funds. Meanwhile, Mr. Cohen was working his own ruthless magic in the federal courthouse downtown. Thanks to the digital evidence I had compiled and the FBI's direct involvement, a federal judge had just reviewed the forged power of attorney and the illegal wire transfer requests. Recognizing the immediate threat of flight risk and asset dissipation, the judge granted an immediate emergency asset freeze on Lakeside Holdings, the LLC that Malik had so carelessly set up. The $200,000 Jason had attempted to wire to Amber's personal bank account was intercepted mid-transfer and locked permanently in a federal holding trust. Every single financial artery feeding their luxury lifestyle was completely and surgically severed. 4 hours later, my cell phone screen lit up like a frantic slot machine. The notifications began pouring in like a digital avalanche, vibrating continuously against the marble counter. 50 missed calls in total. 10 from Jason, 20 from Brenda, 15 from Richard, 5 from a furious Malik who was still stateside. My phone vibrated so violently it nearly rattled onto the floor. I picked it up and watched the locked screen scroll through a timeline of escalating beautiful panic. Rachel answered the damn phone immediately, read a frantic text from Jason. The hotel front desk is telling us our primary cards are declining. Another message popped up seconds later, this one featuring spelling errors from his shaking hands. Rachel, call the bank right now. Something is severely wrong with the accounts. They are embarrassing us in front of the entire resort management team. I poured myself a fresh cup of hot coffee, blowing softly on the steam as I watched the unhinged desperation unfold in real time. The final text came through from Brenda, her typed words practically screaming through the screen in all capital letters. Rachel, pick up the phone. The resort manager is standing in our private villa with 3 security guards. They are saying the initial deposit failed and all the backup credit cards are flagged for international fraud. They are threatening to throw us and all our luggage out onto the street right now if we do not provide a valid payment method in the next 10 minutes. We have absolutely no cash on us. Help us immediately. They were stranded 10,000 miles away from home, trapped in a foreign country without a single dollar, humiliated in the pristine lobby of a 5-star resort and entirely stripped of their stolen wealth. The glamorous, deceitful paradise they had funded with elder abuse had just transformed into a suffocating, inescapable nightmare. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my coffee, smiled across the kitchen at Beatrice, and firmly pressed the ignore button. The phone stays silent for exactly 2 minutes before the screen lights up again. It is a WhatsApp audio call from Brenda, a desperate attempt to bypass international cellular restrictions and roaming charges. I let it ring 3 times, taking a slow, steadying breath before sliding my finger across the glass to accept. Brenda does not even bother with a greeting. Her voice is a shrill, hysterical screech that pierces the quiet kitchen. Rachel. She screams, her panic bleeding through the speaker over the chaotic, echoing background noise of the resort lobby. We have a massive emergency. Our accounts have been hacked. Someone completely compromised our banking information while we were traveling, and now the hotel management is threatening to call the local authorities because our cards are declining. You need to act right now. She demands that I immediately access Beatrice's emergency medical fund and wire $10,000 directly to the resort's private accounting department. Brenda lies with practiced, terrifying ease, weaving a frantic tale about identity theft and international cyber criminals targeting their vacation funds. She insists that if the wire transfer does not clear within the hour, they will be thrown out onto the pristine streets of Bali with nothing but the clothes on their backs. I hold the phone away from my ear, marveling at how effortlessly deception flows from her lips, even when she is thoroughly cornered. I inject pure, unadulterated confusion into my voice. Hacked! I gasp loudly, sounding entirely overwhelmed and helpless. Oh my goodness, Brenda, that is terrible. But I do not have access to Beatrice's emergency medical fund. You and Jason never gave me the authorization passwords for those accounts. Remember. Brenda loses whatever thin shred of patience she has left. Do not play stupid with me right now, Rachel. She snarls, the venom completely masking her earlier panic. Go into the study, break into the desk drawer if you have to, and call the bank broker. Tell them it is a life or death family emergency. If you do not send that money immediately, we are going to starve in a foreign country. When I maintain my facade of helpless incompetence, apologizing that the bank strictly requires Jason's signature for wire transfers, Brenda completely shatters her polite, affluent mother-in-law persona. You useless, incompetent daughter-in-law, she shrieks. You are entirely worthless. We bring you into our home, we give you a roof over your head, and the one time we ask you for a simple favor, you try to let us rot. Suddenly, a third voice echoes through the call. Malik has merged himself into the conversation from his office in Seattle. His tone is no longer smooth or professional, it is completely unhinged. Listen to me very carefully, Rachel. Malik barks, his voice vibrating with rage. If you do not wire those funds right this second, I will personally file a lawsuit against you for gross negligence and financial endangerment. I am a licensed broker and attorney. I will tie you up in civil court until you are bankrupt. You will never work as an accountant again. Do exactly what Brenda says, or I will destroy your pathetic little life. I listened to their threats echoing through the kitchen speaker, feeling absolutely nothing but ice-cold satisfaction. 3 years ago, I came to Brenda crying because my father had passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind a massive pile of medical debt that threatened to drain the last of my savings. I had begged Brenda and Richard for a short-term loan, just to cover the funeral expenses, promising to work overtime to pay them back with interest. Brenda had coldly sipped her tea, looked me up and down, and refused to offer a single dime. She had lectured me about financial responsibility, claiming that giving me a handout would ruin my character and encourage dependency. Now the tables have completely turned. I lean into the phone microphone, dropping my fake anxiety entirely. My voice becomes steady, sharp, and chillingly calm. You know, Brenda, I say, letting the words cut through the digital static. Didn't you tell me to be financially independent? You explicitly said that real adults do not rely on family bailouts to fix their money problems. You guys should just tighten your belts a little, maybe skip the room service and figure it out. Real wealth is about self-sufficiency, right? The dead silence on the other end of the line is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. I just used her exact heartless words against her, trapping her in her own hypocritical philosophy. Before Brenda can unleash another wave of screaming, Malik interrupts the call, his breathing heavy and erratic. His end of the line sounds chaotic, keyboards clacking frantically as he types. Wait, Malik mutters, his voice suddenly dropping its aggressive pitch. The LLC accounts. Lakeside Holdings is completely locked out. It is giving me a federal compliance error code. I can hear the absolute terror creeping into his throat. A federal compliance error code does not happen from a random hacker. It happens when a government agency executes a hard freeze on suspected criminal assets. Malik is a smart man. He is a predator, but he understands the financial system well enough to realize that a standard bank glitch does not trigger federal lockouts. Someone tipped off the feds. Malik shouts, panic completely overriding his arrogant composure. The wire transfer Jason queued up for Amber's penthouse was intercepted. The feds flagged the deed transfer. Through the phone, the situation in the Bali resort lobby devolves into total, unmitigated chaos. I can hear Richard yelling at Jason, asking what Malik is talking about. Jason starts screaming back, blaming Malik for setting up a sloppy shell company. Brenda is wailing in the background, demanding to know why the police are being mentioned. They are literally turning on each other in the middle of a five-star lobby, thousands of miles away from home. Malik is screaming at Jason through the conference call, demanding to know if Jason used an unsecured network to file the paperwork. Jason is cursing at Brenda for demanding this expensive vacation in the first place. The facade of the perfect wealthy family is entirely ripped away, leaving nothing but a pack of greedy, terrified criminals turning on their own blood to save themselves. The resort manager's voice filters through the background noise, firmly demanding that security escort them off the premises immediately. I sit in my kitchen, sipping my coffee alongside Beatrice, listening to the magnificent symphony of their ultimate destruction playing out over an international connection. I end the call without saying another word, letting them scream into the void. The silence in the mansion feels victorious. But the game is not entirely over yet. I turn my attention back to Jason's synced computer monitor. Since I have full access to his messages, I can see the frantic, venomous digital communication flying back and forth between Jason and Malik now that they are cut off from the phone call. Jason's texts are coming in rapid fire, his grammar completely falling apart in his blind panic. Malik, fix this right now, Jason types. The hotel just threw our luggage out the front doors. Amber is texting me that the real estate agent canceled the penthouse closing. We are ruined if that deed transfer does not go through. Malik's response is cold and entirely self-serving. You are on your own, Jason. The feds are watching the accounts. Do not contact my office again. But Jason is a cornered animal, and cornered animals are incredibly dangerous. I watch a new message pop up on the screen, a text Jason sends directly to Malik, despite the warning. The words make my blood run entirely cold. Listen to me. Jason types, his desperation turning into sheer malice. I am booking us budget flights back to Seattle right now. Go to the house. Get the psychiatric transport ready and waiting in the driveway. The minute we land, we throw the old lady in the asylum and kick Rachel out onto the street by force. I do not care what it takes. We are taking that house. I stare at the glowing monitor, the sheer brutality of his plan, staring back at me. He intends to use physical force and medical kidnapping to steal his grandmother's estate the moment his feet touch American soil. He thinks he still has the upper hand. He thinks Beatrice is just a helpless, paralyzed victim, and I am just a naive accountant. He has no idea what is actually waiting for him. With their fraudulent accounts completely frozen and every high-limit credit card declining rapidly at the resort front desk, Jason and his parents face the brutal reality of sudden poverty. The luxurious five-star paradise transformed instantly into a hostile prison. The resort management, realizing they were harboring international scammers without a single dollar to their names, unceremoniously kicked them out of their oceanfront villa. To avoid being stranded on the streets of Bali, they were forced to engage in the ultimate act of upper-class humiliation. They had to physically pawn their designer wealth just to survive. Brenda wept hysterically as she handed over her diamond Cartier watch and 3 pristine Chanel bags to a local street broker for a fraction of their actual value. Richard surrendered his vintage Rolex, and Jason had to trade his custom gold cufflinks and designer luggage just to scrape together enough cash for emergency airfare. But the limited funds did not buy them first-class luxury. They could only afford the absolute cheapest budget economy tickets available. Their journey home became a grueling 30-hour nightmare. They were crammed into tiny middle seats, suffering through 4 separate exhausting layovers in crowded, noisy airport terminals, surviving on stale pretzels and lukewarm water instead of the champagne they firmly believed they were entitled to. Throughout that entire 30-hour agonizing journey, Jason unleashed a relentless barrage of digital abuse whenever he managed to connect to free airport internet. My phone screen lit up constantly with his unhinged, venomous text messages, each one dripping with malice and misplaced entitlement. "You are completely dead to me, Rachel," he typed, his rage radiating through the screen. "Leaving your own family to starve in a foreign country is unforgivable. I am going to make your life a living hell the second I touch down." Brenda sent a series of frantic voice notes, her voice hoarse from screaming over the background noise of a busy transit hub. She promised to absolutely destroy my professional reputation, vowing to call every single accounting firm in Washington to ensure I never found work again. "You useless, vindictive girl," Brenda shrieked in one audio message. "I will drag you through civil court until you are entirely bankrupt." Jason followed up with explicit threats regarding the house and the medical kidnapping scheme he had orchestrated with Malik. "Have your bags packed and waiting on the porch," he commanded in his final text before their longest flight segment. "Malik has the psychiatric transport waiting on standby. The minute I walk through that door, you are out on the street, and the old lady goes straight to the asylum. You messed with the wrong family." They entirely believed that I was just a frightened, incompetent wife who had somehow stumbled into a bank error, completely oblivious to the fact that they were threatening the exact woman who had already meticulously engineered their absolute destruction. While they suffered through turbulent flights over the Pacific Ocean, I was upstairs in the master bedroom, calmly and methodically packing my personal belongings. I was not packing out of fear, and I certainly was not packing because Jason had ordered me to. I was packing because I was finally irrevocably done with this toxic family. As I folded my sensible, tailored business suits and placed them into my suitcase, a profound sense of liberation washed over my entire being. I looked around the lavish, overly decorated bedroom that I had shared with a man who viewed me as nothing more than a financial stepping stone. I remembered the countless times Jason had taken my hard-earned paychecks to fund his lavish networking dinners, leaving me at home to eat reheated leftovers. I remembered Brenda scoffing at my affordable car, demanding I upgrade my vehicle to reflect their wealthy status, completely ignoring the fact that my modest spending was the only reason they had food on the table during Jason's repeated business failures. For 5 years, I had shrunk myself down, silencing my own needs and sacrificing my money to prop up their grand delusion of high society success. Zipping my suitcase closed, I felt that heavy, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders permanently. I was shedding their parasitic grip on my life, stepping fully into my true power. The Bellevue mansion was completely dark. From the outside, the massive $5 million estate looked entirely abandoned, exactly the way a frightened, defeated wife would leave it. But inside, the reality was entirely different. Beatrice and I sat in the center of the sprawling, shadowed living room, completely relaxed and sipping hot chamomile tea from delicate porcelain cups. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the streetlights, while the only illumination in the room came from the glowing screen of my high-definition iPad. I had tapped directly into the exterior security camera feeds, giving us a flawless, real-time view of the long, winding driveway. We sat in silence, the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock amplifying the anticipation humming in the air. Finally, the headlights of a cheap beat-up sedan cut through the darkness. It was a standard budget Uber, a hilarious downgrade from the private black car service Jason usually demanded for airport transfers. The vehicle sputtered to a halt near the front porch. The grand, triumphant return they had always envisioned was reduced to a pathetic, exhausted stumble. Jason yanked the passenger door open, hauling a cheap canvas replacement duffel bag out of the trunk. Brenda emerged next, limping heavily up the cobblestone walkway, her expensive designer heels swapped out for cheap, flimsy airport slippers. Richard trailed behind them, looking haggard and utterly defeated. They moved like a pack of rabid, cornered animals, vibrating with an explosive mixture of physical exhaustion and pure, unadulterated rage. I watched Jason storm toward the front steps, his face twisted into a vicious snarl, entirely ready to execute his malicious plan of throwing me out into the cold night air and institutionalizing his own grandmother. Jason did not even bother reaching for his house keys. Fueled by 30 hours of humiliation and unchecked fury, he raised his foot and kicked the heavy oak front door violently. The door, which I had intentionally left unlocked, swung open with a massive echoing crash that reverberated through the silent foyer. Rachel Jason screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing with absolute menace as he stormed into the dark entryway. "Pack your trash and get out of my house right now. You are completely finished." He marched aggressively toward the living room, ready to unleash his physical and verbal abuse, fully expecting to find me cowering in the corner, begging for his forgiveness. He took 3 heavy steps into the room, raising his arm to point threateningly into the shadows. Then the lights flooded the room all at once. The massive crystal chandelier overhead blazed to life, instantly illuminating every single corner of the grand living room in blinding, undeniable clarity. Jason stopped dead in his tracks, his commanding shout dying abruptly in his throat. His cheap canvas bag slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Brenda and Richard, who had been marching right behind him, gasped audibly and stumbled backward. Jason's eyes went wide, absorbing a scene that shattered his reality into a million jagged pieces. I was not cowering. I was sitting comfortably on the leather sofa, holding my teacup with a calm, predatory smile. But more importantly, he did not just see me. Beatrice was not strapped into her medical wheelchair. She was standing perfectly upright in the center of the room, tall, commanding, and radiating absolute authority. And she was not alone. Flanking the supposedly paralyzed matriarch on her left was Mr. Cohen, grasping a thick, intimidating legal binder tight against his chest. Flanking her on the right were 4 federal agents, dressed in crisp, dark suits, their silver badges gleaming menacingly on their belts, their cold, professional eyes locking directly onto Jason. Jason stood frozen in the grand entryway, the cheap canvas duffel bag slipping from his fingers and hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Right behind him, Malik pushed his way through the open front door, complaining loudly about the terrible Uber driver, only to stop dead in his tracks. The arrogant, untouchable real estate broker took one look at the federal agents standing in the living room and physically recoiled, bumping right into a horrified Brenda and Richard. The entire family stared in absolute paralyzing terror as the grandmother they had maliciously planned to lock away in a psychiatric ward took a slow, deliberate step forward. She was not leaning on a walker. She was not shaking or struggling for breath. Beatrice walked with the commanding posture of a billionaire matriarch directly up to the two men who had arrogantly conspired to steal her life. "Surprise," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with lethal satisfaction. She raised her hand and tossed a thick stack of printed papers directly into the air. The forged power of attorney. The fraudulent deed transfers and the intercepted wire requests fluttered down like snow, landing right at Jason and Malik's feet. "You boys really should have paid much more attention in law school," she added coldly. The lead FBI agent stepped forward, his expression stone cold as he pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his utility belt. Malik immediately panicked, his smooth corporate facade crumbling into sheer desperation. He threw his hands up in the air frantically, spouting complex legal jargon, citing jurisdictional technicalities, and claiming he was operating strictly as an advisory consultant under attorney-client privilege. The lead agent did not even blink. He reached into his suit jacket, pulled out an official federal injunction, and shoved it hard against Malik's chest. "Save the courtroom performance for the federal judge," the agent commanded sharply. "Your real estate license was permanently revoked by the state board 3 hours ago, and your brokerage firm has completely disavowed you. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and elder financial abuse." Malik's knees visibly buckled as the agent roughly secured his wrists behind his back. Seeing his co-conspirator go down so quickly, Jason completely lost his mind. He spun around wildly, pointing a trembling finger at the door. It was Amber. Jason screamed, his voice cracking in pathetic, cowardly desperation. "Amber set the whole thing up. She pressured me into buying the penthouse because of the baby. I am just a victim in all this." I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the absolute cowardice of a man throwing his pregnant mistress under the bus to save his own skin. "Actually, Jason," I said, setting my teacup down on the saucer with a sharp clink, "I ran a quick trace on your offshore accounts while you were flying coach." When the FBI froze the shell company, Amber noticed the funding completely stopped. She immediately drained the remaining $40,000 of your personal savings and boarded a one-way flight to Mexico with a completely different man. Your devoted pregnant girlfriend completely ghosted you the second the stolen money dried up. Jason gasped, clutching his chest as if he had been physically shot. Brenda and Richard, finally realizing the inescapable magnitude of their destruction, collapsed to their knees, right there on the hardwood floor. Brenda began weeping hysterically, crawling toward Beatrice and grabbing the hem of her expensive slacks. "Mom, please," Brenda sobbed, her makeup running down her face in dark streaks. "You cannot let them take our son away. We are blood. We are family. You have to show mercy." Beatrice looked down at her crying daughter-in-law with an expression of pure, unfiltered disgust. She smoothly pulled her leg back, stepping entirely out of Brenda's desperate grasp. "I would rather leave my entire $5 million estate to a local dog shelter than give a single penny to a pack of greedy parasites," Beatrice replied, her voice echoing with absolute finality. "Take them away." The federal agents hauled Malik and Jason out the front door, their panicked protests fading into the cold night air as they were shoved into the back of waiting black SUVs. Brenda and Richard were left sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, knowing that by tomorrow morning, Mr. Cohen would execute the formal eviction notice. With zero assets, frozen accounts, and millions in mounting legal debt, they were staring directly down the barrel of absolute bankruptcy. I calmly picked up a sleek manila folder from the coffee table and walked out onto the front porch. The red and blue police lights illuminated Jason's tear-stained, terrified face through the cruiser window. I knocked twice on the glass. As the agent rolled the window down, I shoved the folder directly onto Jason's lap. "Those are the finalized divorce papers," I said, with a cold, triumphant smile. "You can keep the cheap duffel bag, but I am keeping my self-respect. Have a terrible life, Jason." I turned around and walked back inside, locking the heavy brass door permanently behind me. Today, the Bellevue mansion is officially sold and that toxic chapter is permanently closed. Beatrice and I relocated to a stunning, sun-drenched villa in Florida, overlooking the clear blue ocean. I am running my own highly successful forensic accounting firm right from the patio, and Beatrice spends her afternoons sipping margaritas by the pool, healthy, happy, and entirely free from the parasites who tried to bury her. We built a beautiful new life on the solid foundation of the truth. Have you ever discovered that the exact people loudly preaching family loyalty were the actual ones holding the sharpest knife right behind your back? How did you completely turn the tables and expose their lies? Tell me your story in the comments below. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about claiming your power and getting the ultimate justice. The story illustrates that blood and marriage do not automatically guarantee loyalty or love. Rachel's journey teaches us the critical importance of financial independence and firm boundaries when dealing with toxic individuals. Often, those who preach the loudest about loyalty are the exact ones using it as a weapon to exploit you. By trusting her instincts and securing her own future, Rachel brilliantly transformed from a victim into a fierce survivor. Never let anyone gaslight you into sacrificing your health for their selfish comfort. Stand strong, know your worth, and always protect your peace. Share your own stories. Comment below.